Thank you so much. It is lovely to be here this morning. It's always a privilege to share some of the stories of the kids that Hope 365 care for. So I hope that you're really encouraged this morning. I want to show you a little photograph. I had the privilege of visiting Hope 365's project a few months ago in March. Jane and Michael are no strangers. I've been there many, many times over the years since Hope 365 was founded, but this was my first time, and what a joy it was. And this little photo is of some of the boys who have been rescued from the streets, and we'll share a wee bit more about that shortly. But what really struck me was this is where they live, so it's a rehabilitation centre that they come to when they've been rescued, and as we try to trace their families and reunite them. And one of our amazing staff had designed this lovely piece of wall art. And what captured my attention was that little phrase, "Hope lives here." And I just thought it was a beautiful representation of these precious boys' lives and the journey that they were on. Hope lives here. So we will come back to share a little bit more about these boys. In Antrim Coast Vineyard, I know that your vision of transformation and shared hope is for every heart, home and headland. And I suppose as we come this morning, it's just that reminder that as believers across the world, that we have this shared hope in the transforming love and power of God. So to kick us off, I would love to share just a few brief thoughts from Luke chapter 5, verses 17 to 26, the story of the healing of the paralyzed man. And here we discover a home that could be described with those words, "Hope lives here." This story takes place in Capernaum. There's so much in it. I only have time this morning to share a few brief thoughts, and so I'd really encourage you to take some time later on today just to read over those verses and to reflect on what is going on. But it tells us that one day, as Jesus was teaching, the Pharisees and teachers of the law who had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem were sitting there. And the power of the Lord was present for Jesus to heal the sick. And one of the first things that struck me about this story was that there's a very clear difference between those in this story who recognized God's power in their midst and those who missed it or chose to ignore it. There's this contrast between the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who over and over and over again in the Gospels seem so intent and focused on catching Jesus out, on proving him wrong. But then in this story, we have these friends bearing their friend on a mat and many others who witnessed the power of the Lord. And Luke says that people have come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem, and they've converged on this home in Capernaum. So Capernaum was a farming and a fishing village on the very northernmost tip of the Sea of Galilee. So to get there, some of those people would have potentially walked up to 200 kilometers on foot to see Jesus. And they came because they wanted to witness God's power. It was the hope and promise of God's power that compelled these men to bring their friend in front of Jesus. And when they got him to Capernaum, they reached the house. And it says this: they could not find a way to get to Jesus because of the crowd. So they went up on the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. They were undeterred by this obstacle in their way and then literally dug through a roof. And I often find it helpful to try and put myself in the scene, and I kind of can't quite imagine some of the reactions of people. I mean, imagine if now the roof, well, questionable here, but imagine if now someone was lowered through the roof. It would be a bit of a shock. But it talks about how whenever Jesus interacts with them then, I thought a wee bit about what Jesus saw and what he said. And one of the things that I love most about this passage is captured in verse 20, and it says this: when Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." When Jesus saw their faith, faith expressed in the act of carrying their friend to Jesus. And it made me reflect a little bit about how, certainly this is true of my life, and maybe you can identify with it too. There are times where it has felt like I can identify with the friends, that I'm the one carrying people towards Jesus or helping to, in action, in faith, in prayers. And there are other times where I have been the one who has needed other people to carry me towards Jesus. The Greek word that we translate as saw combines both the physical act of seeing, but also the mental understanding. So when Jesus saw their faith, they were truly seen, all of them, the friends and the paralyzed man on the mat. And they were seen for the faith and the hope that they had in getting their friend to Jesus, that if they could just get him to the feet of Jesus, then maybe something would change. Jesus saw, and then he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." This story is reflected in some of the other Gospels, and in Mark 2, verse 5, it's translated, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And the word son is teknon. It literally means child. Throughout the New Testament, it's used to indicate this sense of dependence and affection. And so part of what Jesus saw and understood in this situation and in this moment with this man and the men who lured him was that they were all relying on Jesus. They came because they were responding to the power of the Lord, and it was their faith that made their feet move as an outward expression of the trust that they had in Jesus. And in this moment, Jesus sees the person, not just the mat. Jesus sees the deeper needs, because we're told that he doesn't just heal him physically, but he uses these words, "Friend, your sins are forgiven," or "Son, your sins are forgiven." Forgiveness, love, acceptance. And so it's that a paralyzed man doesn't just receive physical healing of his body, but healing that restores his relationship with God. And at the end of this particular story, we're told that his response was to go home praising God. Luke ends this story with the response of the people that were gathered, and it says this: "Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, 'We have seen remarkable things today.'" Hope lives here. The people in that home in Capernaum maybe use different words to express it, but over and over again in the Gospels, we see examples of how hope lives here because of the transforming love of God. And this morning, we would love to share with you some stories from Hope 365, hopefully that will encourage you. We'd love to introduce you to some of the amazing children that we have the privilege of carrying towards Jesus, and to share some of the remarkable things that we have seen and that bring praise to God. And so I'd love to invite Michael, who I will declare as friend and boss. I introduced him as my boss to Carol, and he said, "No, friend." So I'd love to for Michael to share some more.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Laura. That's brilliant. Thanks so much for allowing us to come down and share a wee bit about Hope 365. It really is truly remarkable what God has done over the years. I'm absolutely blown away by it. If we just go on to the next slide there for a wee second, we have seen remarkable things today. Now, this photograph, I always start just explaining the context of that. There was no Hope 365. I was out in the streets of a town called Shashamene in Ethiopia, and I had been told about a problem with street kids, and I needed to see it for myself. So about 1 o'clock in the morning, went out and took that photograph, and to be honest with you, was horrified with what I saw. Children lying on top of each other to try and get some body heat from the child underneath. I just couldn't believe it. I just said, this is just so wrong. It just came out of me. And the furthest thing away from my mind then was to think about remarkable transformation in these kids' lives. But that's what God has done, and it's been an incredible adventure. I never expected it to develop the way that it has developed, but that's what happens whenever you're working with God. If we just pop on to the next slide, it just shows you where Shashamene is. It's about 5 hours south of the capital, Addis Ababa. And some of you folk here will be aware of Bogaji. Stand By Me is an organisation that I was familiar with, and that's where I first went to Ethiopia, to Bogaji. Shashamene is about 3 hours away from Bogaji. It's a very different context. The next wee sequence will give you a wee bit of a feel just as you travel down the road, the sights, and well, you won't be able to get the smells, lucky for you, but you will get the sights of Shashamene. Just a very deprived area. It's a very big place. It's about the same size as Derry, roughly. So it's a big population, poverty everywhere, and every night, would you believe, in this city are about 2,000 street kids sleeping on the streets on their own. Isn't that awful? 2,000 children. And if you just think of your own children and your own grandchildren, imagine them having to be out at night. But it's just poverty, it's just faces everywhere, it's just people everywhere. But smiling faces, I've got to say, and faces that are always very, very welcoming whenever we arrive to see them. Donkeys and carts everywhere. It's like travelling back in time, and those little blue and white badges or tuk-tuks are absolutely everywhere. But the context is poverty and a lot of people. But what I want to do is I want to hone in on one particular wee child, a wee boy called Debiso. And he was the very first street kid that I had ever met. So it's amazing the way God brings these people across your path. But what struck me about Debiso, and you can see it in that photograph, there's a depth of sort of despair in his eyes, a darkness in his eyes. Just a hopelessness, really, I suppose, in his eyes. And to think of a child who's on the streets all day, every day, and doesn't even have a pair of shoes. You can see these kids here scratching. They won't have washed for dear knows how long, and the clothes that they're wearing won't have been washed for a long time. Imagine sharing a sack with somebody to try and keep warm at night. And that's the reality for these kids. It's really awful. Little cuts that they get on the street end up getting infected, and you've just got this horrible scene, real poverty, no care for these kids at all, and just nobody to look after them. He pulls out a pair of flip-flops, and for him, that's going to be him facing another day, not knowing what another day holds, not knowing whether he's going to have any food to eat that day. It's just an existence rather than a life. It really is really difficult. But whenever you do go out at night, this is what you see. You see these piles of sort of sacks, and I thought that there were sacks of potatoes or rice, to be honest with you, and then I realized that they were moving, and then you realize that these are actually children lying underneath these things. I mean, what sort of world are we living in that children end up having to sleep in places like this? And you know, whenever I asked Debiso about where do you sleep, meaning what part of town do you sleep in, he told me he preferred to sleep in the drains. So you're actually going into the drain now at the side of the road, and you'll see what I mean whenever the camera refocuses. Isn't that awful? Individual kids made in the image of God of every bit as much significance are you as me, or me, living like that. It's just so incredibly wrong. But you see, Debiso, whenever I asked Debiso, well, basically just to find out his daily routine, his routine was he didn't know if he would eat or not each day whenever he woke up in the morning. That's why he has a box around his neck. The box around his neck is stuff that he'll maybe sell. Look at the food that they're eating. This is called boule, and this is basically as good as it gets for these children. If they earn a few pence doing work, they get the leftovers that other people have eaten, and they put them in a big bin liner, and then they ladle it out. And these kids have to pay for this money, and that's what street life is like for these children. It's absolutely beyond belief. But you know, as if all of those things weren't bad enough, the thing that got me more than anything else was actually whenever I asked Debiso what age he was. Ask him what age through the interpreter, and you just get a shrug of the shoulders. Doesn't even know how many years old he is. I'm not talking about his birthday. I'm talking about is he 6, is he 7, is he 8? And I didn't realize then, but what I now realize is so many of these street kids, that it's exactly the same, that they end up not knowing what age they are and living very much from one day to the next. So that's very depressing, sorry. The good part starts, all right? The good part comes now. This next slide is the beginning of the good part, if I can get that up on the screen. Testimony Bota, translated means hope home. And this was our very first project. So whenever we saw those kids lying on the streets in Shashamane 11 years ago, we thought we need to do something. A long, convoluted story, which I'll not go into now, but without my wife, we wouldn't have had a charity shop. We opened up a charity shop when we came home. I know nothing about charity shops, so thankfully Jane did. So she came in, and we got a little charity shop up in Ballyclare, and that, with the funds that we got from that and other things, we started this project. And this is basically an assessment centre where the children come in. We've got psychologists and social workers, carers. There's about 11 staff there, and they are all passionate Christians. Let me tell you that first and foremost. It's not a job for these people. It's a real ministry to reach out with the love of Christ to help these children. They'll come in here and they'll be with us for maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, as we try and find out why are they on the streets. And there's a whole host of reasons. For some, it's a case of being orphaned. AIDS wiped out a whole generation of these children's parents. So many lived with their grandparents, and then the grandparents lived in little rented hucksters of places, and all of a sudden the children were on their own, had no way of paying rent, so therefore out in the streets. For other kids, it's just dysfunctional families, it's addictions, it's abuse, it's all sorts of things. For others, it's just simply a case of poverty. There isn't enough food. The parent maybe can't earn enough food to look after 3 or 4 children. At least whenever we have had hard times here, there's help. The government helps us. There's no social services in Ethiopia. There's no way of helping. So these kids go out to try and look after themselves. And it's a really brutal and a horrible sight. But you know, for me, what's really important to get your head around is the change and the transformation that starts to happen. This next wee video clip is actually what happened whenever the very first kids came into our centre. So this, as I say, would be about 10 years ago. And the kids came in. That's the Biso there in the red shirt. We brought over a little bottle of bubbles with it for us, for the kids to play with, and they loved it. It was like an Xbox to them. He scores a great goal here. Everybody loves football. There we go. World Cup celebrations. Can't better that. But the kids just loved this, but they were filthy. Absolutely filthy. Their clothes were filthy. They were filthy. We needed to get them into our facilities, to get them cleaned and washed, showered, and to get them new clothes. Simple things, but whenever you haven't washed for a long time, to feel clean is a great thing. And to have clothes all the way from Ballyclare is even more special. The Biso's got a pair of shoes from Ballyclare. But isn't it lovely to see this and to see the smiles on their faces? Now, this was the very first day whenever we opened up that centre, so things have obviously moved on from that. But we did put this photograph up on our shop window, said, "Do you recognise these clothes?" So the folk who had donated some of these clothes were saying, "That's my wee Jimmy's top," or whatever, and it's wonderful. But it is, and to this day, poor Laura is going with a team of 20 people in less than 2 weeks' time, and they're all going to be carrying 2 23-kilo bags stuffed full of all sorts of clothes. So that's 40 bags. That's a lot of clothes, but it's amazing and what a help it makes. But, you know, to get you an idea of what the poverty is like, you can see the Biso there and what he came in with that first day. Well, what I thought, though, was the best thing I could do is show you the Biso's jeans. Isn't that shocking? Backside ripped out of those, zip broken, no underwear, stinking, and look at the size of them. I mean, imagine your child or your grandchild, whenever they're this size, being out on their own overnight for weeks, months at a time. It just defies belief. It really is awful. But we're going on a wee bit of a journey now, because you'll see in this next image, the Biso sleeping in a bed for the very first time ever. Now, that's a very precious photograph. It really, really is. Can you imagine? We all know what our beds are like in the morning. You don't want to get up. You're so comfortable, all snuggled in. Imagine. He had never experienced that until then. That bed came in the back of a donkey and cart, by the way, as well. But, you know, wonderful. So a journey has begun, and of course, beds are important. The next slide shows something else that's very important as well. A home, having a secure home. And these kids, what we do for children like the Biso, that's him in the Kellogg shirt in the middle, we form little group homes. So our primary focus on all that we do starts with street kids, and we try to reunite them with their families if we possibly can. And probably about 90 to 95% of the kids are reunited with their family. We're able to do that. It takes time and a lot of effort. I haven't time to go into that today. But for the children like the Biso who are orphaned and all the other kids in this photograph, then they need to have a secure family environment, a home environment. So we've got the lady here on the right who looks after these kids. She's a live-in house mum, looks after these kids. They just call her mama, and on they go with life, doing their chores just as similar to any other child. And it's absolutely wonderful. A lovely environment, believe me, compared to the houses. that most of the folk live in Shashamani. So it's lovely to be able to give them this degree of comfort. But of course, something else is very important, as you'll see in this next slide. A big part of childhood is going to school and to get an education. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the school. Laura's going to come back and talk a little bit about that at the moment. But for these children here, I cannot get into your mind and communicate how important having a school uniform and going to school is. Whenever I was at school, I hated my school uniform. Can I just be honest? As soon as I came home, I got that tie off me. Couldn't cope with that. But see, for these children, they run in and put their uniform on to show you they're so proud. But the reason for that is they have never belonged. They've never been part of anything. They have always been ostracized. They have had things thrown at them. They're blamed for everything. I brought a wee group of kids in once to a wee roadside tavern, and you'd thought I brought rabid dogs in. It was the owner came out, get them out, they're not allowed in here. It was absolutely awful. It was as if they were subhuman. And that's what they're living like day and daily. Now, if you get that hammered into you all the time, it must be very difficult to get it out of your mind. So these children, whenever they get a school uniform, they believe that I'm going somewhere with my life. I've got some potential. I've got a future. People believe in me. I'm going to do something good with my life. And they give it their best, their absolute best. You can see the pride in their eyes. That's the Biso, by the way, on the left-hand side as you look at the screen. And as his wee journey continues, you'll see in the next slide, the guys make the best possible efforts in school. They're not all geniuses, but honestly, some of them are. It's amazing. They all will give you their best. For all you teachers there who are working with very disenfranchised children who don't really want to learn, you need to go to Ethiopia and then you'll get a different sense from these children. These children really want to learn. The Biso's wee red cap, by the way, says Ballycastle 2019 on it. So that's another little bit of our country. But if you can see the marks on his, if you just go back to that wee one there, if you can see the marks there just on his report card, look at that, 97, 90, 100, 96, 99. A wee boy who started life in the drains. And yet that's the marks that he's getting on his scorecard. I didn't sleep in the drains, but my report cards weren't like that, I can tell you. It's amazing, absolutely fantastic. And up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see what looks like scribbles to us, but that's Amharic script. That's the language that they speak in Ethiopia. And we asked the boys, you put up in your bedroom, above your bed, what it is that you want to be whenever you grow up. Give yourself something to aim towards. So Debiso's surname is Bulo. So what that says is Pastor Bulo. So Debiso has decided he wants to be a pastor, which is absolutely incredible. And that's still true of this day. He's a very, very hard-working, well-adjusted kid. So the next slide just shows you that transformation that we've had from this wee lost soul with bare feet and sad, sad eyes to this boy, a big strapping lad now with brilliant scores, still the same, by the way. Look at his report card there, 100, 197, 98, 198. Crazy. He's just won a place, actually, in the equivalent of a sixth form college. He had to do an entrance exam, and he was selected and got that place. Isn't that incredible from where he started? But, you know, he said to me, just after I took that photograph on the right, he said, Michael, can speak a bit of English now because they're learning at school. He says, could you bring me an English Bible? I says, yep, no problem at all. I'll bring you an English Bible. So the next time I came out, we went into the centre. I'd given him his Bible, and he calls me over. Can I read to you from my English Bible? And I hope if we can get the volume pumped up nice and loud on this next slide, you'll hear what the Biso read.
The Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him. He will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you give me. For I was hungry, and you give me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you give me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you come to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of those brothers of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to
We'll
those...
just cut it off there. Isn't that incredible words? Of all the bits of the Bible to read. Nobody put him up to that, and nobody told him this is a suitable passage to read. This was between him and God. Honestly, I was in tears. I couldn't believe it. I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. He had received these things. This is the living Word of God, and it's transformed this wee lad's life. And it's transformed so many of these children's lives, from street kids into children who are living their life for the Lord. It's unbelievable. And it truly is remarkable. It's something that I could never have envisaged whenever we started to see the life change in these children. And we keep going, and we keep going, and we keep seeing them growing. This next image that you'll see here is actually Debiso, the same boy. If we just knock on to the next one. Him in blue there, that is Debiso now, as of last year. And Debiso and Jamal and Musa, the three kids there, are going to be translating for Laura on her team, with her team, whenever she goes in a week and a half's time. Isn't that an incredible story? That is truly remarkable. And that's what God is doing in the lives of these children. So it really is fantastic. You're wondering why I haven't talked about girls. It's because there's only boys on the street, okay? But things are no better for the girls. And so what we have done is, there's a whole story which we're not going to go into now, but we now have a school in Shashamane. And I'm going to hand back to Laura now, who's going to tell you a bit more about the challenges that we faced there and a bit more about what God's doing there.
Thanks, Michael. The Hope 365 Academy. Another time, Michael can tell you the adventure of how that came about. But it was at the request of our staff, who wanted somewhere that the boys we were rescuing from the street, and particularly the boys who were living in our care full time, could get an education. And so the Hope 365 Academy came about. It became an opportunity not just to rescue street boys and provide them with a place to learn, but also to support other vulnerable girls and boys within the community. And we currently have around 320 students who attend our school. And on the next slide, you'll see assembly. Very exciting. Assembly gets to happen outdoors in Ethiopia, not inside. And in this next little video, it'll give you a little insight into what a school day might look like. These are some of the girls who attend our school. And Ethan, if we just go on to the next one, super. So our boys and girls come, they walk from their homes in the local community. The spaces in our school go to the kids who need them the most. And so they are children who are from the poorest families in the community. They come, they receive a place at school. We currently educate between grades 1 and grade 6, but we have dreams of extending our school from kindergarten all the way up to grade 8, which is primary education in Ethiopia. And whenever our kids come to school, it's obviously an opportunity to learn. but it's also somewhere that they receive their uniforms, they get educational resources, they receive healthcare whenever they need it. There's clean water to drink. There are staff, incredible staff, who care deeply about every child who attends our school and wants to help them reach their potential, whatever that looks like, whether they'll become a joiner, a farmer, a doctor, a teacher, whatever the future might hold. And really importantly, school is somewhere that's safe, where our kids can be kids, where they know that they belong, where they know that they're cared for, and where they have that gift of just getting to be children. And so school is a place that is full of hope and full of joy, and hope, we can say, lives here. I want to introduce you to one of the older girls who attends our school. Her name's Sega. Sega is 17, so she's in grade 6 at the moment, which is currently where our school stops. But in September, God willing, we will be continuing on to grade 7, and so Sega and her friends will stay in our school at the moment the children move on to other schools within the local community to continue their education. She's 17 now. When she was 5 years old, really sadly, she was abandoned by her parents, and we don't know why. But her aunt took her in. Her aunt had 6 children of her own and was the sole provider for their family. And so I'm sure you can imagine how challenging life has been just to make ends meet and to put food on the table. And school, if we click onto the next slide, is a safe place for her and her friends. It's somewhere that they can learn together. And in class, she's told us that her favourite subject is maths. Sega can frequently be found helping other people who perhaps struggle in some of the subjects. At the moment, she serves as part of our school girls' school council, which is about female students being representatives for the other girls in school and raising their voices to speak up on some of the challenges that they face. When she grows up, her dream is to become a scientist. We asked her recently, what did school mean to her? What did education mean? And I just want to read this this little quote that she shared. Education is important because if we send girls to school, we educate the whole family. Girls share a big burden in the house, and they can be role models. Sega is a very talented young woman, and we're really proud to have her as part of our school and to support her. One of the big challenges after the Hope 365 Academy began was that food is a huge challenge in Ethiopia. For lots of families, they are struggling day to day just to provide enough. And on Monday mornings, what started to happen was children came to school and started fainting. Because they might not have eaten anything over the weekend or very little. And so actually they were coming into school unable to concentrate on what they needed to learn at best and at worst fainting. And so in response to that, we wanted to start a school feeding program to provide breakfast and lunch for every single student every single day. And so Nourish to Flourish is how we make that happen. It's an opportunity for people here in Northern Ireland who have responded, and it makes a huge difference in the lives of our kids. For £10 a month, we are able to provide breakfast and lunch for a child for the whole year, which is just incredible. And so Sega, if we click onto the next slide, Ethan, and her friends receive their breakfast and their lunch every single day because of the generosity of folks here who support Nourish to Flourish and who help us to provide for our school feeding program. And food seems like such a simple gift, but it truly transforms lives and brings hope because school provides an education which can transform our kids' lives. And food means they can make the most of their education because they get to come to school and concentrate and learn and take in all that they're learning. So Nourish to Flourish is one way that folks here might get involved with Hope 365. It would be really remiss of us to come this morning and not make a mention of our wonderful shop in none other than the metropolis of Larne. And so Hope Hub in Larne celebrated its 2nd birthday recently. I don't know if any of you have perhaps walked past, been in, know where we are, but we have a dedicated team of volunteers who give up a few hours every week to support us alongside our staff. And we also have people who generously donate secondhand clothing, bric-a-brac, books, children's toys. And sometimes these small things can seem small, but actually they make a huge difference. And so just to give you a little example, a bag of secondhand, good quality secondhand clothing, once that's all been sold on, can be enough to provide for 210 school meals, which is just incredible. The things that we do locally here in Northern Ireland, I love that it has that ripple out effect and can make a difference globally, and that the things we do here can make a difference in the lives of kids who live in Shashamene in Ethiopia. So just to say, if anybody would like to have a little chat, ask questions, find out more, Michael and I will be hanging around afterwards. Please come and have a little chat with us. I hope that this morning that this has been an encouragement. Some of the stories of the remarkable things that we have seen in Hope 365, that we have witnessed. We'd just love to say thank you so much for the opportunity to come and to share this morning. It is an absolute privilege always to advocate on behalf of the kids that we are privileged to care for, to worship, to share, to thank God for all he has done. So thank you so much.